from?
Yeah, it's well, we have a church very close.
Oh, so nice.
All right. But I'm not sure how well we are live, I think. So like, yeah, you're broadcasting live. So let's go. Hey, dear Zuzana, it's lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
We're today here with Neonyt taking over. Neonyt taking over the channels of the Sustainable Angle. And we do that as part of the Expo that they do yearly normally, the Future Fabrics Expo. And this year, obviously, it's a Future Fabrics Digital Expo because, well, the whole world, or a good part of the world, is in a very special situation with the pandemic, and we are way more online than ever before. Luckily, if I imagine always think about this 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, the whole lockdown would have been way more frustrating, even though we still can't really maybe hug all the people we would like to, but we can have discussions all over the globe, and this is amazing. And I'm very, very happy to have you here today. We met very briefly in the beginning of this year when like the whole pandemic was already known, but not really a pandemic yet. We met in Mumbai. I was part of the jury of the Circular Design Challenge of Lakme Fashion Week, which happens twice a year in Mumbai, an event that I can really highly recommend. And during that Lakme Fashion Week, there's always one day, the Sustainability Day, focused on sustainable fashion designers and giving them a platform. And also once per year having the Circular Design Challenge with this focus. And this focus here obviously was on circularity as a whole concept, but you, the winner of this year, have presented a very innovative material, and that's definitely what we're going to talk about today. But obviously also, since we are Neonyt, we're going to talk about the fashion aspect. Yeah, so first of all, I would like you to introduce yourself a bit. I mean, you're the co-founder of MALAI, and yeah, tell us like what is MALAI, and maybe a little bit what's your journey. You're coming definitely from very different backgrounds. You are in India now, and also, yeah, I will get into more details a little bit. But you got a very interesting journey, I
think. Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this event. I have to admit that all kind of webinars and online discussions are relatively new to me. So I've been enjoying quite a few of them since the lockdowns. But it's always very nice and always a different experience from talking to people in the real audience, because somehow I'm less nervous because you don't see all the people. So that's great. And to tell you a little bit more about my practice or a company that I co-founded, as you mentioned, we are called MALAI, or MALAI Biomaterials. And we are a relatively small-scale startup based in South India, in a state called Kerala, where we focus on research and development of sustainable materials, natural materials, and coconuts are in particularly very important raw ingredient or raw material to work with. You mentioned before, this year has started like greatly for us. We happen to be the winners of Circular Design Challenge as part of the Lakme Fashion Week. So, we submitted an application to the competition, and we didn't really know, if we'll pass or not, because obviously we are material development focused, maybe not that directly, the fashion designers, but it's been a very interesting journey. So we started in 2017, and initially it was just me. and our co-founder Susmit. I come from Slovakia, so I am not Indian, but I came to Mumbai initially for a job offer. So I worked for a large company, and after a year, it was a year in a corporate for me. So I was like, okay, that's it, thank you. And I worked on a quite interesting project over there. We did material research into the material, into the waste material streams, and it really, I guess, got me an idea about the scale of the problem. And I still think, recycling is great and it's definitely a practice we should all adopt in an effective manner. But I also increasingly felt that, it's perhaps not the final solution to the problem that I was facing. And I wanted to somehow focus on materials that are sustainable in their entire life cycle. So around the same time, when I was still working for the company, I met Susmit, who is a mechanical engineer and a product designer. And we share a lot of similar interests together. We share a passion for materials, a passion for making, passion for sustainability. So a lot of similar values. And at some point, I remember I told him, I did this research before during my master's degree studies about a material called bacterial cellulose. And actually, in Philippines, where it originates from, they grow it on water from mature coconuts. So I'm wondering if anybody in India does the same thing, because you guys have so many coconuts available. And unfortunately, I couldn't find anybody producing bacterial cellulose at the time, but it sparked an interest in Susmit big enough that he decided to continue working with me on developing, kind of a supply chain for bacterial cellulose grown particularly on water from mature coconuts. And he also happens to come from a state called Kerala, which literally means the land of coconuts. So you can perhaps see the connection about the importance of coconuts for him as well. And we started with an idea of, how can we make this, how can we develop bacterial cellulose into commercially viable materials? Because there's been, designers and scientists have been exploring the potential of this material for almost a decade now. And there's been some really great examples of, where this material can go, and different kinds of vision of for its application. But you couldn't really get it anywhere, unless you were not growing it somewhere at home, or you were not brewing kombucha. It was impossible to get through. So we decided, why, if we can't get it, why don't we do it, and why don't we do it in a way that considers environment as, the first aspect. We started very small. We started in a small town called Channapatna in southern India, where we started collaborating with a local coconut processing unit, who find themselves with a lot of water from mature coconut waste basically every day. They would have up to 4,000 liters of this water. And they were also wondering, okay, what do we do with it? I guess we kind of met them at the right time. So we joined our forces, and for 7 months, I think, we only focused on material research. We researched, what are the ways, yeah.
Just, I mean, because to shape it a little bit for our audience, because I think now we get into some of these really, really interesting and maybe also more difficult to understand parts in it. So,
Sure.
You started now talking about the coconut water, which is essential for your process, and you said it's waste. But then when I first heard about your project, I was like, wait, how can it be waste? I mean, people in Europe, they crave for drinking it in all kind of different packages. There's some hipster brands selling coconut water. So why is that a waste product from where you come from? And
yeah, unfortunately, people in Europe don't know much about coconuts either. So I always find myself having to explain this topic, but there's no problem, of course. So water that we use for the fermentation process of bacterial cellulose, our primary raw ingredient, comes from the brown coconuts, which are mature coconuts. Whereas water that is so popular these days in the West, especially, comes from tender coconuts, which are sometimes they're called baby coconuts. Basically, they are younger, a lower state of maturity than the ones that are already mature. So the tender coconuts would be maybe 4 or 5 months old, I think. And they are primarily harvested for the water content in them. It can be up to half a liter, I think. They don't have much of the coconut white flesh developed yet.
Right.
Whereas the mature coconuts, they are harvested mostly for the copra, the fiber that is
Outside.
everywhere around in a husk, for the shell, which you can use for making activated charcoal, for example, but mainly for the white flesh of the coconut that coconut oil is made from or grated coconut is made from. But the water content in mature coconut is only 150 milliliters, and it's a little more salty in taste, so people don't prefer to drink it that much.
Yeah, and it's even kind of acidus, or I mean, you can't just put it into the ground because it would be not good for the environment, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It causes quite a environmental problem in many locations where they don't dispose of it in a proper manner. In many coconut processing units, they would just release all the coconut water in a drainage system, or in the kind of area surrounding the processing unit. And if it's an organic material, it will start fermenting, it will start acidifying the existing ecosystem, of course, over time.
Right, yeah. Just I mean, because as you say, like many Europeans, me included, don't know much about the coconut industry and what kind of applications are there. So then, okay, we just learned the drinking coconut is something quite different than the coconut that is used for producing oil, for cooking, or for cosmetics, etc., etc. And I think
Yeah.
also India is like the fourth biggest coconut producer or something like that in the world. I think third biggest. So yeah, a lot of actually probably also kind of unwanted waste, even though maybe not the normal waste, but natural waste, still potentially harmful for the environment. So, and you need that water. You can use that water, and then you grow on it. So that's kind of your garden for making
Yeah.
your cellulosic materials. So
Yeah,
maybe
it
you
is.
can dive a little bit into like what happens there. How does this work?
So this is it's a very ancient process. Actually, the process of fermentation is as old as humanity is, maybe even older. And so in our case, it works like this. We When the coconut is broken for the purpose of taking the white flesh out, we collect the water that basically pours out of it. We sterilize it. We add other ingredients that go into nutrient for the bacteria type that we use. And then we would put this water, or in that case, already a nutrient, in a kind of tray. We introduce bacterial culture, and we let the organism basically do its job. So this bacteria feeds on the carbohydrates in the nutrient, which are basically sugars mostly. And over the time, it starts producing kind of a slimy layer, film on the top. Eventually, it consumes all the water in the tray, and after 12, 14 days, you can see kind of a 1.5 centimeter thick layer. It looks kind of like a jelly. It looks actually very much like the flesh from tender coconut, but I will not go to there since the knowledge of coconut might be different with our audience. And so we harvest this layer that's been grown then over a period of time. And this is the bacterial cellulose, or you might be familiar with it from the world of kombucha, which is where it's called mother SCOBY. It's a similar thing basically.
Another very trendy drink in Europe for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we harvest, and that is essentially purest form of cellulose on Earth. It's a material that doesn't come with anything extra that we would need to get rid of, or or extract from it in order to use it. We just again we sterilize it so that other microorganisms don't start doing their job and decomposing it directly, and then we use it for the rest of the processes for making the malai material.
Yeah, well, that sounds simple, but somehow I have the feeling it's not that simple. Otherwise, maybe more people would be doing it. But yeah, you are pioneering, like using that really for fashion, and then also I think further developing. I mean, if I recall it correctly, I mean, you presented at Lakme Fashion Week. I mean, it was quite an impressive setting where like the other participants of the competition. I think at the beginning it was 400, and then the last 5 was it? I think made it to the final in Mumbai and presented in this really nice setting with models and stage center light. I guess you must have been a bit nervous with like all the audience around it and really fancy show. Well done also to Lakme Fashion Week. It was really fun being there and very impressive to see sustainable innovation presented like this in this such high quality. Also, obviously, with the patronage of United Nations, putting it quite high on the table. Yeah, I mean, there you presented kind of a collection already. So, like, you really translated this whole thing into very practical products already. But at the same time, I recall you said, well, this will still need quite some time for further development. And so, like, let's dive into this a little bit. Like, how is that thing going on? How is your I mean, you have a nice, from the pictures, I haven't visited yet, I hope I can one day, but you have one of the most tempting labs I've seen for a long time, where you can actually, where you have like, fresh air and nature around. But definitely, it was very different from how I would imagine in the first moment, like a material innovation lab. Yeah, can you talk us a little bit through that? Okay, how is then the next steps? So now you got this layer, the bacteria, they are fed, you sterilize them again. We got this really, really pure cellulosic material. And what's next? And how do you get that into fashion?
Yeah, I guess our approach to material innovation has been different from traditional approaches in so many ways. Yes. So as you say, we do have quite a green lab, that or place where we can create these materials, and I think that stems from the fact that we really started from kind of a grass level. We didn't start developing this material because we would have because we would have, let's say, received the brief from somebody, and now we would only be working in the lab. We really went on and worked with available resources around us, so that we can create something that works together not only in the lab but also in real life, so to speak. And So so we have the bacterial cellulose, as I mentioned before, and the bacterial cellulose in that form is not a very stable material yet. It can be used for many, many different purposes, not only materials for fashion. Also, we have to consider many other aspects of material development, such as cost, such as durability, such as performance, and everything else that comes in the picture. And around the same time, we started looking into availability of the natural fibers in South India, and we started experimenting with them, and we have identified, 3 types of fibers that provided us with those extra material properties that we were looking for in a way. So currently we work with hemp fiber, banana fiber, and sea salt fiber, which are another very important ingredients for us. They
What
are
was the last
basically
one?
rolled
Hemp and banana?
banana stem and sisal or sisal. I'm actually
Seashell.
not sure.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, people pronounce it in two different ways, so I'm always kind of trying to guess
Yeah, well,
which one.
we are a global community. I'm sure we have like endless different pronunciations of it. But
Yeah,
just to make sure that everybody understands it, it's good to repeat.
yeah, exactly. So sisal or sisal, however you're used to it. And these are world's strongest natural fibers, basically. In our case, research part was challenging from many perspectives. We had very little funding, little available equipment, so we had to kind of navigate through that. But also, we had one major commitment, which was to keep our material biodegradable, and we committed not to use any aggressive chemicals, nothing that would cause any damage to environment where the material is created, to the workers who are created, to the consumers who are then making products or using the product, and eventually back to the environment when you dispose of the material. And it might sound like it's an easy thing to do, but actually it's really not in today's world, because oil-based products are ingrained in so many different places in the material world, especially. Um, and so to get back to, I guess, the original line of the conversation, we have, yes, bacterial cellulose. We have three types of natural fibers that we refine to the stage where they can bond with bacterial cellulose in the best way. We have natural dyes. We work with a natural dyes laboratory from North India. They have developed their own process of cold dyeing, basically, because most of the time when you want to use natural dyes, you have to use heat. You have to heat your
Yeah.
water and everything. But they've been clever enough to overcome the obstacles of this process, which allows us to use natural dyes without use of heat. We have then developed a special process of formation of a sheet. The nice thing about the material we create, we are not only able to create it in a two-dimensional, flat form, but we can also mold it in three-dimensional shapes. So then you can imagine, if it's within the realm of fashion, you could just mold a hat, or a bag or a shoe or something like that. Although that's still under R&D. But yeah, we got to a stage in our research when we had sort of a basic recipe for a material, or basic material that already worked within certain applications. But of course, I think, whenever you're developing a new thing, there's no like stopping. There's no stage of perfection, and we still have a lot of milestones to achieve in order to um, I think in order to be at our best, and that fits within the realm of improving some of the material properties. That fits within the realm of improving some of our processes, because, as I said, we actually work always with very limited budgets. So it's we have to do everything step by step, which in a way is also good, because it gives us enough time to kind of prove the concepts that we put out there. Um, and so right now we have just about to start the second phase of the research in order to improve properties such as tensile strength, such as abrasion resistance. But then the COVID came, so we had to put it on hold currently. Um, but hopefully we can start again soon.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, obviously, I think that it's wonderful, like the approach that you're following. It's for me, it's one of these examples how how one should really always look around the whole globe, and how people do it, and we need more exchange between communities, like how to do things, really the style of working. as I said already, okay, your lab looks quite different to what other labs look like. But that's just the visual aspect to it. But also, I mean, the impact that it has. I mean, you're following in so many ways a way more organic kind of process, like also in ways like how you grow your product, how you learn, I guess, in a way, probably from day to day. And I mean, quite often now in the last few years, we've seen like big announcements from startups claiming we're going to be the new wonder fiber, and I don't know what is going to be possible with it. But yeah, you're not doing that, maybe because you don't have a million marketing campaign. But I think you're not doing that because it's not your approach. You go really step by step. You work with the local environment. You've gone where you find your raw materials. You kind of source around you. You kind of very local in that sense. But you're obviously working on solutions for a global market. I find that yeah, it's a very great approach from my point of view. So at this stage right now, I mean, as I said, I've seen some of your products. I was able to touch them a bit, and it's quite an intriguing product. But as you say, well, it will still go a lot of other places. But where are you right now? What is kind of the strengths of your material at the moment? What would you say, like, what is the best applications, and where does it work well now already?
I think at the moment where we see the material working the best are really the accessories. So we are able to, you know, make any kind of bags, any kind of you know, pouches, any interior design objects perhaps too. So that's where our material feels comfortable. We've also tested it for different types of footwear, and it's still an area that I think we need to do a little more work in terms of making the material more abrasion resistant. Because you know, we are trying to create an alternative to something like leather. Leather is incredibly versatile material that we've been developing for thousands of years. And it would be very, I think, naive in a way to say that we can do it all now, you know, because obviously there's a lot more that needs to stand the proof of time. But we always try to look at it as, you know, from the perspective of does it really fit that application? And if it doesn't, we don't try to fit in there yet. Rather, we try to work with the concepts that we see more potential, which currently are the accessories. We get a lot of inquiries from footwear industry and furniture industry, automotive industry, because everybody currently seems to be in hunt for leather alternatives. And I think what people often don't realize is that, you know, is that leather really can do a lot, but also for a price, you know, and with the required time. And I think the expectation is to have some sort of a miracle material that can do it all right now, because everybody needs it. And that would be wonderful. But I think, again, it needs a little more time for development. And so, yeah, majority of our clients at the moment are people who are bag makers, who need an accessory of that type. We had successful trials with sandals, flip-flops, slippers, this type of footwears, which also work quite well. Also, a lot depends on type of climate where the material is, since it's completely organic and natural. There will be slight differences, you know, between how the material feels and behaves here in Kerala, let's say, and how it behaves somewhere in you know, Saudi Arabia, let's say, where it's really dry. The climate is very, very different. I think that's also another aspect that people don't always necessarily think about, you know, when it comes to materials.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's an interesting aspect, obviously. Well, I think, yeah, you said something very important. I mean, I personally, I mean, I hope there's not too much outcry, but I really love leather still. I know there's obviously massive problems if we look at how animals are kept, and I mean, yeah, that's definitely something I do not love, or I would be close to say I hate it, even though I see it a bit more differentiated maybe. But for sure, there's a really high demand on alternatives to leather. And it's sometimes I'm quite annoyed when I see the claims and this being the new leather zones, and I'm like, did we ever really check what leather does and like the properties? And I have bags from like my grandfather from leather, and it's like, no way, like at the moment any other material would kind of hold this long and also age with this kind of
look,
charm.
that's great. Yeah, I know.
So there's still a way to go, and maybe we don't need to kind of substitute all the leather in the world. I mean, to a certain degree, I still hope that this special quality it has will also still be there. But I mean, there's so much product. We had it in the talk before with Kai of Aris. This is one of the biggest problems, like the amount of product out there. And there's so much product that is really purely fashion products in a way that it's not made for a long time, and that's, I think, where you come in, where a lot of the alternatives already now have a really big advantage, because even leather in theory would also be biodegradable depending what you put in there. Obviously, that's another really nasty part of that industry, all the chemicals, heavy metals that may go into leather. But with you're concentrating on biodegradability, and that's, I think, it's a very important part. I think it's the two things at the moment that are the most exciting and most promising developments in materials. Is on the one hand looking more into recycling, upcycling being a part of it for the fashion industry, like reselling, rental systems, and so that's quite promising here and there. But in terms of materials, biodegradability is an absolute must to go there, because if we continue to do new products, and I believe, yes, humanity as a global society will still produce quite a few more products over the next couple of years. This industry is not going to break down and stop producing, I'm afraid. Then biodegradability is such an important kind of development. How do you see, like how do you cope with this kind of the ambivalence between you want to create something that also lasts maybe, and then you want to create something that doesn't last in a way that it's going to be heavy on the environment, or obviously being heavy on the people that produce it, etc. Do you have a borderline there? Do you say, like, okay, we create with our cooperation partners, we create bags that are good for 1 year or 5 years, and then you can get rid of them in this certain way? Is there something like concepts like this you think about, like to kind of think in circles?
I think a very, very important keyword in this conversation would be collaboration, because it's not like things are impossible to do in a way that I see them as an ideal way of doing, with things being biodegradable, with things being made without aggressive chemicals. But this world is quite a complex place, and very often when you look at the scientific studies and tests that have been made in labs, solutions actually exist, but very, very few of them, even good solutions, are brought to commercial level, to the level where people can actually benefit from them. And so I think with MALAI, we committed not to compromise, because it is that very belief that we started this whole project with, to have materials that we can trust and that can safely return to nature. And not all the materials are possible to be made in this way. And I think what we often work with, rather than materials, is people's mindset and people's way of thinking. And that's really insane sometimes, like you were saying, people expect materials that are biodegradable to last same way than oil-based materials. And obviously that's a very broad spectrum, so maybe I should narrow it down, perhaps people would expect Malai to last as long as a well tanned, let's say vegetable tanned leather. It will not be like that, and we have to be realistic also when we work with materials. We have to set the priority. Okay, I does this product need to outlast my generation, really? Or do I want a product that I will use for 2 or 3 years? And after that, maybe I will not even need it. Maybe I will change my taste in fashion. Maybe, better things will be out there. So I don't want this one to last. Maybe it's a temporary solution. There's a lot more thought, I think, that we should start applying to our thought process because obviously sustainability is becoming a more of a closer to mainstream topic, and I think this is very, very vulnerable place where a lot of things can get misinterpreted, and it's not easy to put this topic within kind of a frame always, because everything is connected together in a material world, everything influences each other. And so I think more than anything, we need a good guidance, on how to think about sustainability rather than expecting things that are far apart from each other to be together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this crisis, if it's really showing one thing very clearly, it's showing a lot of things quite clearly. I think it's an amplifier for so many problems we have in societies, in our industries, and so on. But if it's showing one thing, also it's like we will need to be way more agile. This is a word that's a bit of a buzzword in business for many years, and there I find it annoying. But in reality, if you just think about the basic idea, or like my business partner always likes to highlight, it's not about resilience; it's about anti-fragility. Because so far the supply chains and so have been very kind of same for many, many years. They've just led to more and more efficiency in terms of getting cheaper. Basically, that was the drive for the industry for like so many decades now. And now everybody felt, oh wow, this created some really difficult interdependencies that do not allow to react agilely to whatever happens around. So that's again, I pointed it out before, and I will repeat it a few times today. The concept of working globally is, I think, so important. You have to really think global, but also act local and act global at the same time. So you have to see what makes sense in the region where I am, and what can I source globally, and also what is the applications. So there's always this idea in my head. How wonderful would it be if we really also can get to a place where one of this kind of natural cradle to cradle idea. This is two different, the technical and the natural cradle to cradle concept. And if we get to natural ones, and I can actually have a t-shirt that I only wear once, and then I compost it afterwards, and it's kind of at least net zero, better net positive from the footprint, because all the materials that go in there kind of work that way, and the energy that is used to produce it, etc. It's a tempting idea, because I believe, we're talking about fashion. Fashion is trends. Fashion is always kind of reinventing, remixing everything, and you need this. And I believe that's not going to stop. Also, I personally would not like to stop it, because then I feel we live in a bit of a boring world. But the baseline of that is creativity. Humans are creative. Every human has this potential of being creative, having a creative output. And the base for that, from my point of view, is curiosity. This is one of the main drivers of humanity, always been curiosity. Like, wait, I see an island over there. Like, what is that? Already the first humans. Why did they always go further? It's like always, I see something on the horizon. I want to see what it is. This drive. And I feel always that that's the baseline for fashion trends. There's a lot of stupidity. You can say, way too much. I agree. But the baseline, why it's there, I think is not going to go away. We will want to wear something different. I will want to have a different color, different material, different cut at some point. That's kind of how we are, at least many of us. I'm not saying no. Somebody who wears the same clothes all the time also can be genius and look amazing, but not the normal thing. So like, I think biodegradable materials are a super important part of that. So how would you now work with a brand? I mean, you're doing a lot of collaborations already. If I look at your website, you have quite a few brands you work with together. Are you open to work with more? How would that work at the moment? What if somebody wants to approach you now and saying, great stuff you're doing, how can we work together? What would you answer?
Yes, we did quite a few collaborations, and we honestly are always open to collaborations, and we value all collaborations, but especially the ones where creativity is really applied, and where people are not simply looking for a substitute of material, but perhaps also have a different way of thinking, you know, and are able to think with new materials, but also in relation to new concepts and new understandings of products. And so we so far worked mainly with, smaller scale brands, individual designers, because it's also been easier for us. We still are quite a small scale production, therefore we wouldn't even be able to think in large scales yet. And on another hand, these are the people very often who have more flexibility in terms of what kind of products, you know, and what volumes of productions they put out there in the world. So it's much easier to test new materials such as ours with somebody of a smaller scale. We have been approached by a couple of fast fashion mass manufacturers and bigger brands. Of course, we are on regular basis. However, and I think they also very often realize that for us to be able to get to their scale is not realistic at the moment, and scale is not always the problem. Another problem is, like fast fashion exists. I will not go into whether it should exist or not, but okay, it exists there, and at least some of it is willing to look for alternative solutions. But then, they work with a very specific price point with very short deliverable times or lead times. Yes. Yeah. And so very often, we would be asked to consider a certain price point, which is really, really difficult for us. We are working so hard towards like keeping the production economical so that it's accessible to people who make, to brands, to people who want to adopt the new materials. And really, if we would be to cut our costs somewhere, somebody wouldn't just get paid, or like we wouldn't be able to get some of our ingredients in the quality that we need it for. And all these things are very essential. So yes, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to communicate to this to bigger brands. But to tell you more about collaborations, I got lost in this topic a little bit. But yes, we work with mainly people from Czech Republic and Slovakia, actually, because that's where I come from, and I have a very strong network among the designers and manufacturers over there. So initially, we were working more in that area when it comes to market. But especially during, I think, this pandemic, I think a lot of people also here in India have had a lot of time to perhaps rethink their approaches. So we've been having increasing amount of inquiries and proposals for collaborations also from within India, which has been great.
That's super nice. I mean, I think that one of the things that impresses me with India is obviously also endless challenges. I guess especially in this time, not easy in this kind of country. But I mean, it has the whole supply chain. I mean, it's a huge country also, but yeah, you have everything there from the raw material in different ways. Obviously, also quite well known for cotton, but in this case also for Malai. Until everything in production, and then you also have the market there. I mean, the growing market, obviously. So I always feel like if obviously in the last few years I've been in touch a bit more with Indian brands. They are mostly interested to enter the European market, and we try to help them. But also I'm sure that in the next couple of months, maybe already, but for sure next 5 to 10 years, there will be so many opportunities within the Indian market, and I feel that that's a growing consciousness there, and I'm very happy to see that, because obviously, especially in such a developing market, the earlier you get in there with this kind of product, this kind of storylines, the better you are in position to really grow sustainability into a mainstream thing, which then would enable it to have a much bigger impact, which I think is the baseline we all are after. So great. Maybe just, I mean, Leila kind of joined us already again. This is a sign we will be opening for Q&A. I have one last thing maybe as introduction in that direction, because our audience is from the UK, probably also quite a bit. It's definitely global, but I'm sure there's a few people. And I mean, in your CV, you also had your possibly quite exciting time in London at the Central St. Martin's College.
Oh yeah.
So you don't need to tell us all the story now. Let's keep some information, some ideas for the next talk. But how's it? Have you been working with London-based, British-based brands before? Is that a thing for you so far?
Yeah, it's been definitely interesting. I spent 3 years in London. Most of the time I was actually studying. I graduated from MA, it's now Material Futures. Back in the days, it used to be Textile Futures. And that's been, pretty intense. And I have to admit it changed my, perception on my entire practice. So that was the academic part. And also I worked with a couple of fashion brands there. I think only 2 fashion brands. Yeah, it's been frankly quite similar to working in other countries within fashion. But during the MA course, we also got an opportunity to work on a couple of industry collaborations, I guess you call them, when we would do a project based on a brief from an industrial or from industry players. So we've worked with a couple of interesting furniture, design furniture companies. We've worked with a fashion company based in UK as well. So it's been, I guess, the most interesting part is that you are very, very close to what really ignites the trends worldwide. So that's really one of the places I believe where the trends really are emerging from. So seeing that and being part of that has had a lot of influence on how I understand that whole process of trend creation, and I guess where the movements stem from in case of fashion. Yeah, definitely good experience there.
And that's such an important part. And I think that's also why kind of careers like yours are so important for the development of sustainability. Like you have to see how the world works, how the market works, but then you have to also see the realities like wherever you are. And like this, I think new solutions can come up when you mix this. I mean, your personal background and your studying background and now your professional background, like everything in different environments. I'm sure that's very, very inspiring and very, brings a progressive kind of aspect. So let's see. I think we did get like at least a few questions during the talk. Leila, do you want to introduce them, or can you guide me to the questions?
So to the participants, you still have a chance now to ask a question. We still have 10 minutes into the talk. So one question is, how can they get in touch with you, Zuzana? How can they reach you?
Very easy. You can drop me an email if you'd like to, either to me or one of my colleagues. You can find the link on our website, or you can also contact us through Facebook or Instagram. I'm not sure. Can I say the leads here, or maybe we'll post them with the actual post? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll post your website for sure. But maybe so how do you spell it? Malai is MALII? AI?
MALAI, exactly. That's correct.
Right. I see. Somebody's posting the name already in the chat.
I think the sustainable angle and me, we did it at the same time. Okay,
yes.
So next up would be the question from Morgan. Thank you, Morgan. What advice do you have for textile design graduates who want to enter the textile chemistry engineering industry?
What advice do I have for textile design graduates?
No, chemistry engineering.
Chemistry engineering. Wow.
Want to enter the engineering industry.
Yes. I mean, you guys have a lot of knowledge, which is important. I think I'm not sure if I'm the right person to give you any advice, but I would, from my perspective, and in relation to the field that I work within, is to get in touch with people from different backgrounds. You know, see where your skills and your knowledge is really needed, because you don't necessarily have to work in a job that you might not like. There's a lot of opportunities out there where people need graduates like you, including me. So definitely get in touch with an interesting startup or an interesting thinker, designer, whatever is your interest.
Thank you. Next question. You spoke about your material, and the question is the material waterproof, and could you print on
it? Yeah, this question comes quite often. The MALAI is waterproof from both the surfaces. Actually, both of the surfaces of the material look the same and have the same texture, which is quite nice. And it withstands kind of a normal climatic conditions such as snow, rain. If you drop it in water, take it out, it's fine. We wouldn't recommend like extended exposure to water. Like if you leave, something made of MALAI in water for 3-4 days, it might influence the material and weaken some of the bonds. But when it comes to everything like normal wear and normal usage, that the material can withstand.
Okay. Next question is from Mena. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. In terms of alternatives to leather, what materials would you recommend, and are there any sustainable options for metalwork to be used in accessories?
Maybe I can split that in two. So first,
yes.
What is the sustainable or more sustainable options for leather? Do you know, or is there any you would recommend? Maybe MALAI?
Yeah, I think this could be like categorized in few sections depending on how far are you willing and able to go with an alternative. Some people still prefer leather, so I would recommend to go for maybe vegetable tan leather from like a verified supplier. Make sure that at the very least they really keep up the procedure of the correct tanning processes. We as a humanity consume meat on a large scale, so it would be unfair to blame just the leather industry for having leather. Obviously, as long as we eat meat, there will be also leather. So if you are going to stick with leather, at least verify your supplier very, very well. If you are looking for, let's say, vegan alternative, then try to consider also environmental aspects, because I think a lot of vegan leather brands use plastics, so then you end up having polyurethane or PVC-based product, which is also not great for the environment. and in terms of performance and wear is also not going to be great. If you are willing to, you know, explore a whole new world of alternatives, then there are pretty exciting options nowadays, and I believe MALAI is one of them. But there is, you know, mycelium-based leather alternatives, which are really beautiful. There are other natural fibers alternatives, which look great, and you know, not all of them are perhaps completely biodegradable. So there is also that standard you have to consider. Depends on your selection.
I think that's very important to mention. But yeah, there's different qualities. I'm sure. Look at Sustainable Angles archive, or I'm sure they consult very well here. I'm also afraid. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you want to say something, if you can, to more sustainable options for metal work in accessories. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, I worked with metals for 1 year maybe after I graduated from London, and it's been new back. You know, for me, it was also new, but I think again, very important is your choice of materials. So keep everything in a form that can be easily recycled, because metals actually are materials, you know, that are technical nutrients, so to speak. So if you keep your design in a way that the components can be disassembled easily and are maybe not necessarily melted in together, then you can at least recycle them, which is good.
Yeah, very valid. I think that's what I also talked about before with Kai, like the influence, like on the design level. I mean, depending on your material, you should also design accordingly. So like, yeah, metal is always a bit of an alien aspect if you otherwise use fabric. So yeah, ideally you design it in a way that you can separate it, obviously. Otherwise, I think, I mean, I was in the last year quite impressed what YKK is doing. They're not so loud about their sustainability approaches, but they are innovating a lot. And so I can recommend looking into that. Maybe a last question I can see here. I mean, we have more here, but the one is quite interesting, maybe. Okay, let's be quick.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes left. So one question is if your material can be stretched.
Okay, it can be stretched, but not as much as animal leather. So I can see if you are thinking about head making, then, for example, if you want to use MALAI, the molding technique that I was describing before would be much more suitable than stretching.
Okay, last question. What's the next step for you? For MALAI?
Actually, I'd really like to go home now to Slovakia, because I've been here for several months. But that's, of course, my personal life. Professionally and with MALAI, we'd really, really like to progress. You know, it's been so difficult in the past 3 months to make any plans happen. You know, we had a lot of things lined up for us, and many of them had to be canceled and postponed. The most important part being, you know, scaling up our production. So we were in process of like building new shed or building for the production for our lab, upscaling some of our equipment, you know, improving some of the machines. And we are still working on it, but you know, some of the funds got blocked. Some of the manufacturers cannot work because of the pandemic. So I just really hope we'll be able to work instead of the challenges and progress.
Thank you, Zuzana. So this will be it for the questions for now. You can contact Zuzana through made-from-malai.com and follow her Instagram account. We also linked her Instagram account in our last story at the Sustainable Angle on Instagram. And next up in about 20 minutes is going to be a live Instagram interview with Sebastian Thies from Net2 and Max Gegenmann. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Zuzana.
Thanks, Zuzana. I'm looking forward to seeing your work at the next LACME Fashion Week. I hope you can present some further steps already. And then it's eventually, hopefully, also in Berlin, since, I mean, this is just a digital little exchange, but obviously you're still invited to show with us the next physical show that we do. And then I hope also our audience here can really touch your material and get in direct exchange with you. Thanks to the audience. Thanks for all the questions. And yeah, see you in a little bit again.